Be more than human. And welcome back to the channel. My name is Joseph Carroll. I write under the pen name J.R. Carroll. And today we're going to talk about my top 5 most disappointing books of 2022. As we get through the first week of the new year, I just thought about looking back at what a great reading year I had. Not only did I read, I think, over 60 books, and that was by far the most of my life. Um, I also had a terrific year as far as quality of books I read. I got into some new series that I really liked, so I was rolling through those and just happen to be enjoying a lot of those books. And then also, I mostly was able to kind of pick my way through, books that I kind of knew I was going to like. But there were a few, I hate to say duds, but there were a few books that just didn't really hit the spot for me. And these aren't necessarily bad books, and they aren't necessarily like there's a there's at least one in here that I am going to continue with the series even though I was disappointed. So, I don't want people to think I'm bashing on these authors or these books in general. Again, it's not said they're not terrible books. Some of these I was expecting more of. Some of these I was expecting different. And we'll kind of get into those. But here are my top 5. Coming in at 5 is Halo: The Fall of Reach. Now, I am a huge Halo fan. I've played the games since the week that it released, 20 years ago or whatever, whatever it is now, maybe 21 years ago. But played through the games, and my best friend's like, "Hey, you got this channel now. You should probably start reading the books." And I was like, all right, well, I'll give it a shot. Let me see. So I read the very first book in the series, which is Fall of Reach, and I mean, I kind of knew a little bit of the story from the games and from other sources, but getting into the books, um, and it's probably my fault, really, because I knew it was a military, sci-fi book, but it was so super detailed with the military aspect. I mean, I forget the author of the book because in the Halo series they change authors a lot, but it was super detail oriented, and that took away from it a little bit. It's not that I didn't enjoy the book. It was just there were some parts where you felt really bogged down by all the information that it was tossing at you. And maybe at some point I'll go on to the next book, but yeah, it kind of pulled me away from wanting to continue it, at least so soon. Now, on to number 4, which is a recent read for me. It wasn't gonna be. It was gonna be it was gonna be in January, but I had time right there at the end of the year to squeeze it in, and that was All Systems Red, the first book in the Murderbot series. Now I have a review up for that if you want to go check it out. Um, and this is one I feel weird about because I was told from certain people, praise for the main character. Oh, Murderbot is so relatable and interesting, and it turned out to not be the case. But I did find things within the book that really made me want to explore this world more. So and them being novellas, I don't feel bad that it made my top five list because it was a 1 day thing, and I I've been told by people in the Murderbot community that he gets way flushed out, or they get way flushed out. So I will continue in Murderbot, but yeah, I was just kind of disappointed with the character. So hopefully they can keep Martha Wells can keep aspects that I liked, and then grow the character into some character that I'll be happy to follow through. Now on to number 3, and this is another one that came earlier in the year, and another one that one of my friends raved about. It's his favorite series of all time, and as I was getting ready to read it, and then I was like, oh, because I try to do reviews for most of the books I read, so I was like, all right, I'm going to read this and do a review on it. Let's see if anyone else has read it, and it turns out that Mike from Mike's Book Reviews was just getting into the series and had high praise for it, and that is Homeland, and that's by R.A. Salvatore, and that's the Drist books, right? And this is like his origin story. And I know Mike and a lot of other people think Drist is the best character ever. And this is another series that I might come back to at some point. It's a trilogy. They're not super long. So I might at least try to bust through this year and get that first, the Crystal Shard trilogy, I think it might be. But yeah, there was just something very like it. Now I know this is within the Dungeons and Dragons universe, I believe, and it was written for fans of Dungeons and Dragons for sure, because it feels some of the times it feels like I was supposed to already know what type of creatures these were or what places they were. It very written to the fandom, which I'm fine with. It's great when you're in the fandom, right? But I just never got that deep into Dungeons and Dragons. And then there were some things where I just didn't think that Drist should have felt the way he felt. There was no real reason behind it. He automatically knew that his people were the bad people, but he had never seen any other people. So I'm like, well, how do you know that they're the bad guys when you've been raised by them and you've never seen anything else? So little inconsistencies for me. The R.A. Salvatore does great fight scenes, battle scenes, excellent. And again, Drist isn't a bad character. And at some point I will try to give the second book a go and see if maybe that sparks it in me, because I know a lot of people just love them. And now number 2, and this is right from the beginning of the year, I was doing a reread and doing a discussion with a bunch of people, and that is the final book, The Dark Tower, in the Dark Tower series. Now, I don't hate the ending of The Dark Tower like a lot of people do, but to me, The Dark Tower it's a really long book, the longest book in the series. I want to say it's like 900 pages or something like that. And it still kind of felt like towards the end he rushed it. Like, I almost feel like he could have had another book. Some certain battle scenes should have been epic, and then they just kind of were over too quickly. And I know I know Stephen King even kind of like put himself into the book and was like, oh, everybody, he goes all meta and he's like, well, everybody's here for, you know, cares about the endings and I care about the journey. And I'm like, I mean, the journey is great. I mean, that's what we're here for these long series. But if the series is going to be this long, and especially the last book is going to be that long, you have to pay off with a great ending. And again, the actual ending wasn't the worst thing ever. It was just like the last several chapters in the book kind of fell flat for me. So that was kind of, disappointing. But The Dark Tower as a series is still in my top 5 all-time great, fantastic series. Yeah, I could ramble on about how great The Dark Tower is. Now, my number 1 most disappointing book, and it's crazy that being such a great author and having some of my favorite books of all time, he took the top 2 spots this year. And the number 1 book is also by Stephen King, and that is Stephen King's Elevation. I think this is like a little known book from Stephen King. I think it came out in 2018, and honestly, the reason why I read it is because I wanted to get more Stephen King under my belt. And it was a shorter book, so I was like, oh, I'm gonna knock this book out, get some more Stephen King, see how the newer Stephen King writes. And this book had a kind of like a murder bot. It, like, the premise was really cool, and he had some really good ideas going on, and an interesting concept that I'd never thought about. Now, I'm not gonna ruin the book for you, but he went from and this is probably my only true negative review that I did this year, but like he takes this great premise and he's like, all right, really cool, and you go, and it's a short book, but you go through half the book, and you're getting so many interesting things that are happening and interesting things that could happen, and let's follow this. And then he goes off into like his political points of view in the book, and then the book just falls apart. And then you come back to the original idea right at the end, and it just that's it. There it goes. And I was so disappointed. I was like, this book could have been so cool. And maybe if he made it another 100 pages, he could have flushed out that idea more and weaved his themes and his politics that he wanted to put in there into it easier. But it was more just like punch you in the face with it. So those are my top 5 most disappointing books of 2022. Still, most of them were still good books, and again, I will continue reading in some of these series to see if maybe the second book in the series will raise it back up to where everyone says that they should be. But I appreciate you all for watching. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one.